All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Here we are, born to be kings. We're the princes of the universe. Here we belong, fighting to survive in a war with the darkest powers.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone on the Talkstar Radio Network and the X Zone Broadcast Network, coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and worldwide, and our growing family of broadcast affiliates across Canada, the United States, South America, the Caribbean, Central America, the Pacific Rim, Australia, China, India, Africa, and across Europe. Toll-free worldwide, 1-800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour is Matthew Stein. He is the author of the highly praised book, When Technology Fails, which was published by Chelsea Green in 2008, a comprehensive manual on sustainable living skills. As the owner of Stein Design and Construction, he has built hurricane-resistant, energy-efficient, and environmental-friendly homes. The mechanical engineering side of his firm specializes in product design and development. Among other things, Matt has designed consumer water filtration devices, photovoltaic roofing panels, medical bacteriological filters, emergency chemical drench systems, computer disk drives, and portable fiberglass buildings. Matt is a graduate of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he majored in mechanical engineering. Matt's an active mountain climber and serves as a guide and instructor for blind skiers with the Ski for Light cross-country program. And Matt currently resides with his wife Josie in the High Sierra Mountains near Lake Tahoe in California. Matt's website is www.whentechfails.com. And Matt Stein, welcome to the X Zone.
Well, thanks a lot for having me on today. It's a real pleasure to be on your show.
Well, it's great having you with us, Matt. Technology does fail more than we'd like to admit. And tell me, Matt, what was your inspiration for writing your book?
Well, some people assume I've always been a survivalist because the survivalists really love my book. But back in 1997, I had never considered writing anything like this book, not even remotely. And I'd had at that point in time a 20-year practice of prayer and meditation most every day, not fanatical about it. And that morning, roughly Thanksgiving of 97, I just asked for guidance and inspiration, and I got a real bomb dropped on my lap. I got way more than I bargained for that morning. What I got was sort of an instantaneous cosmic download, roughly 30 pictures that made a storyboard outline for my book from start to finish were dumped into my head instantaneously. And to be honest with you, my first thought was, no way. I thought, this is a huge book, and I can't possibly do this. And the little voice in my head, and I thought also, I don't know all this stuff. How am I going to write about this? And the little voice in my head basically said, well, nobody knows all of this stuff, and it assured me that I had the skills and talents that should I decide to take on the project, then I'd be able to take it to completion. And to give you a kind of a nutshell what the book is sort of the Bible for survival and emergency preparedness and self-reliance combined with green and healthy living. It's kind of like the handbook you want on your shelf to help you prepare and deal with various things falling apart in our world and not working so well. And while the world is still working reasonably well, it shows you how to live healthy and green and more sustainably, during this period of time.
Matt, what is the pit of the stomach exercise, and how could it save my life in a crisis situation?
Okay. Well, when you think about a crisis, there's, say you're lost in the woods. I'm going to use an example. This is a real-life example. There's a gentleman, a high-tech engineering type from the Bay Area, who was traveling through eastern Oregon with his wife and infant child in the car. And they got disoriented trying to take a shortcut on some back roads. They ended up on dirt roads in the middle of nowhere, no cell phone connection. They ran out of gas, didn't have a clue which way to go. He stayed in the car for a couple of days, and then he thought, obviously nobody's coming to get us. I can't just stay here and starve with my wife and kid. I'm going to, try and get out of here. So imagine this. You're in this situation. You don't really know what direction to go in. You're disoriented. The general rule of survival says follow the river. So that's
all right,
what the guy did.
we're going to have a bit of a cliffhanger here because we've got to take a 2-minute break. Exo Nation, our special guest is Matthew Stein, and we'll be back with Matthew on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
I've been a war with the darkest power. The sound of your footsteps telling me that you're near. Your soft, gentle motion, babe, brings out a need in me that no one can hear except in my midnight confession. When I tell all the world that I love you, in my midnight confession. When I say all the things that I want to. I love you. What a little gold ring you wear on your hand makes me understand. There's another before.
Matt Stein is my special guest. www.whentechfails.com is his website. And before we went to the commercial break, you were telling us about this man and his family who got lost, and we were talking about the pit of the stomach exercise. And this guy had spent days in his car and finally realized that he had to do something about it. Matt, so what did he do?
Okay, so what he did was he followed the rational mind, which said, follow the river, and that will get you to civilization. That's sort of one of those kind of rules of survival. Now, what I'm going to tell you is that millions of years of natural selection has bred into each and every one of us the most incredible survival mechanism. That the human beings that didn't have this, they died. They died in wars, disasters, whatever. So each of us has it. The problem is that in our high-tech Western world, we've been trained to follow the rational mind always. And sometimes the information just isn't there to make a right decision. So when that's the case, you've got to get around that rational mind. That's what the pit of the stomach is about. It's about getting in touch with your intuitive inner self, that inner compass that's been bred into us through millions of years by nature. So, okay, he follows the river. Now I'm going to tell you what he should have done. You're in a situation, you know you can't trust your rational mind when it's changing its mind every minute. If your mind says, I think I should follow the river, then 5 minutes later it says, no, maybe I should go down the ridge. Then maybe it says, well, maybe I should stay in the car. You know in that situation, you don't have the information to make a good decision and your mind's going all over the place. So you say, okay, time to bypass that mind, time to do this. You take a few deep breaths, you focus your awareness on the pit of your stomach. That's the area between your belly button and your rib cage.
Okay.
Now, remember, you're trying to stop the thinking. So keep breathing deeply until you can feel the muscles relax between the belly button and the rib cage. Now what you're going to do is you're going to go in pictures. You're going to bypass the thinking mind. So what you do now is you make a picture of yourself, say hiking down the river, like in this guy's situation. Then you feel the pit of your stomach. If you feel the muscles knot up like a tight ball, that's a bad choice. Or if you feel a queasy, sick, nauseous feeling, bad decision, okay? So now you say, okay, that's no good. So maybe you think, well, maybe I should go down the ridge. So what you do is you do some deep breathing again. If you're spiritual, offer a little prayer, Jesus, Buddha, Great Spirit, whatever you want to call it. Ask for help. Keep breathing till you've relaxed. It may take a while if you're in a tense situation. Now make a picture of option 2. Maybe option 2, you see yourself hiking down the ridge line. Maybe you'll be seen by a helicopter then. Who knows? So you picture option 2. Maybe you get that knot in the stomach. It's like, oh, bad feeling again. Bad feeling. The knot, the queasy feeling. It's a bad decision. Then say, okay, well, what about staying in the car? Now your mind is screaming at you, saying, you can't stay in the car. You've been staying in the car for 2 days. Nothing's happened. You're going to die if you stay in the car. So you quiet that down, then you make that picture. You make that picture of staying in the car. Now if you feel an feeling, like an expanded, relaxed feeling, and even though the mind's been telling you you're going to die if you stay in the car, that pit of the stomach's gotten around the mind and told you that's the good choice. Now back to the guy.
Yeah.
He followed the river. It was a steep river canyon. He got exhausted. He got drenched in cold rains, and he died of exposure. Now his wife and kid, they were found. People they didn't show up where they were supposed to be. They traced the cell phone contacts to the nearest cell towers. They got an idea of the general location. They sent people out on, four-wheel drives and cars and motorcycles and, four-wheelers, whatever, and they found the wife and the kid. Mm-hmm. Now, there's countless stories of survivors who will tell you that, they just didn't know what to do, and all of a sudden something snapped in them. Something came in, and it was quiet, and it was calm, and it was unwavering. And that's when you know when it's this inner compass, when it doesn't change. The mind can change its mind, constantly, but the inner compass, if it tells you what to do, it stays the same. It stays steady.
Interesting.
This works.
Is that like the inner clock we have?
It's kind of like the inner clock. I mean, there's something within us that's in touch with the whole universe. And when you ask for help and kind of say, I don't know what to do, please help me, it's like that generic asking sort of opens you up to that universal connection. You can call it God, Spirit, Holy Spirit. There's a lot of different terms for it. Higher self, and it doesn't really matter what it's called. What matters is that it works, and what matters is getting in touch with it. And you can practice this on your own for decisions. My wife calls it feeling out a decision, and I'm an engineer, so I have a hard time with this one often. I tend to run it through my head and knock against the wall a few times, and she says, you could have just felt it out right from the beginning and done the right thing without all of that head-banging exercise.
You don't talk like the regular engineers that I've talked to in the past. You're the only engineer that I've ever talked to who is as spiritual as you are.
Well, I've had quite a variety of spiritual experiences since I had some little ones starting as a kid, just minor incidences, a couple of precognitive dreams, things I wrote down in diaries where, for instance, when I was 16 years old, I went to British Columbia for a summer of mountaineering and in the Canadian Rockies. And I had this dream in the spring, and this gentleman who was kind of invited us out to go join them. He was a little older. He was a school teacher. And he said, why don't you keep a journal? And he suggested it. It's the only time in my life I kept a journal. So anyway, I had this dream, and I woke up in the morning. I'd seen this bearded face with a white background. And I wrote the dream down in great detail, and I felt it was going to happen that summer. And when I got off of the first mountain that we climbed in the Rogers Pass area, and quite exciting for a 16-year-old kid to be on top of these huge mountains of glaciers, and we came down to the pass, and we got picked up by Richard Lamb, a professor at a university in the East Coast, and he was in his white travelall, and that was the bearded face that I'd never seen before in my life, and the white background was his white four-wheel drive travelall. So that was kind of like a first experience. Wow. And it got followed by some really knock-your-socks-off experiences in college, and I almost dropped out of MIT after being initiated by a 108-year-old yogi that just about fried my body, and just the experience was so dramatic. I just couldn't believe it. I just sat there and laughed for about an hour afterwards. I felt at one point like if I stretched out my hand that lightning bolts would come out of my fingers, and that my body would explode with the energy running through me and spread my guts all over the wall. I mean, it was not one of these little experiences where you think, gee, maybe something's happening. It was a knock your socks off, destroy your whole vision, your whole belief systems, knocked out from underneath you kind of experience.
How did that experience change your life?
Well, it shifted my model of reality. Up until that point, I kind of operated my life from a very scientific Western viewpoint. In spite of a few experiences like the precognitive dream and a few other things I haven't got time for, I really believed that the whole universe was like a big soup. They could all be described in terms of laws of physics and chemistry and action and reaction, like Newton's laws. And then when I got zapped by this yogi and I saw people who were healed of paralysis and terminal cancers, and he touched them on the head and they're filled with light and energy, and these cancers go away and their paralysis heals up. I mean, I had a friend who had been a gymnastic champion in high school, and she leapt off and she'd broken her back. That had ended her career towards the Olympics with a back-breaking experience, literally. And it had healed, but it stopped her career as a world-class gymnast.
Yeah.
And she jumped off a couch one day and her back re-broke, and then she went in the hospital and she was paralyzed. And the doctors thought that maybe she'd never regain use of her legs again. And the yogi came and visited her in the hospital, and he ran energy to her, and a week later she walked out of the hospital. So a broken back and potentially permanent paralysis was fully healed within a week's period of time. Just something that the doctors couldn't believe.
What did the doctors say? How did they try to explain it?
Well, they use funny terms like spontaneous remissions and anomalies and stuff like that. They kind of give them a term, and it's like, well, we don't really know what's going on here, and and so they just sort of give it a term and turn their back and walk away. And I mean, I even had an experience when I had a friend in 7th grade who came. I remember coming to class, and she'd just break down crying in class, and all this pain and agony. And her older brother was an Olympic hopeful, and she was following in his footsteps. Was a very promising young athlete. And after this happened a few times, she was gone for a few months. We didn't know what was going on, and then she showed up in class in a wheelchair with full-length casts on her legs. Those, she was walking. I mean, she wouldn't walk for years, and then about 5 years later, she got well enough that she could walk with braces, in a stiff-legged walk with no movement in her knees and full-length braces and a cane. Now, I ended up taking a class in college called Silver Mind Control, and you do some remote health readings for people, and this is sort of like the big experience before the yogi, and you see problems in their body, and then when you're done with that, you kind of fix them up in your head. You don't leave them broken. You sort of see them as being whole and healed. And I hadn't been talking to my friend Barb for months, since I'd gone off to MIT. It was my freshman year at MIT, and I was doing this meditation after the class and every day, and just kind of as something to do, I would visualize her as riding her bicycle and skiing, and because I couldn't leave her in her broken state of her body, which was the last time I'd seen her. And no contact with me for these, 4 months of the fall semester at MIT. And I get home to Burlington, and I call her up because I wanted to tell her about this experience in this class, and this lady who'd done health readings for her and seen her physical problems. And before I even had a chance to tell her anything, first thing she said was, "Matt, my legs have gotten so much better. I've been riding my bicycle lately, and last week I went skiing for the first time in 7 years. And, I just about, what to a brick. I mean, I didn't believe any of this could possibly be true. I'd just been seeing her doing this as something to do in my meditations.
Matt, stand by. We've got to do another cliffhanger, Matt. Matt Stein is our special guest, Exo Nation. His website is www.whentechfails.com. I'll be back with Matt on the other side of this break with the news as the Exxon continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
I love you. What a little gold ring you wear on your hand.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Stein's my special guest, Exonation www.whentechfails.com. Matt, before we went to the news break a little while ago, you were telling us about this young lady who you had been sending, I would imagine, positive feelings about, positive vibes, trying to visualize her getting better, who was in, the last time you saw her, in full leg cast, and then she was in braces, and she walked without the movement of her knees when she did walk. And you spoke to her 7 years later, and she was telling you that she was getting stronger. She was riding her bike, and she had gone skiing for the very first time.
Well, the 7 years was the time span from when she'd first been crippled. And she'd gone to the Boston Children's Hospital, and they gave it a name. They thought they'd seen it 3 times. They weren't quite sure what it was, but they thought it was some, I don't remember the name of the disease, but something extremely rare. Then all the way through high school for the next 5 years, or 6 years, 7 years actually, we'd been very close friends. And her legs had gotten slightly better to where she wasn't wheelchair bound, but she walked with full-length braces and a cane. So then I went away to school at MIT. This is the summer of 1974. And at the fall of 74, I went away to MIT for my freshman year in engineering school, and that's when I did the Silva Mind Control workshop or seminar, and they taught you sort of a basic meditative technique and some visualization stuff. And their meditation was an active meditation, so each day when I did it, and I didn't take the seminar until November of 1974, so then I come home about 6 weeks later, Christmas time, and in the 6-week period between when I took the workshop and went home, just as something to do with my daily meditation, I'd been visualizing her riding her bicycle and skiing. And the first thing she says on the phone is, "Matt, my legs have gotten so much better. I've been riding my bicycle, and I even went skiing for the first time in 7 years last week." So it just blew my mind, because you couldn't call it faith healing, because I had no faith in the process whatsoever. It was just kind of something I was doing because it was an active meditation. I didn't know what else to visualize, so that's what I visualized.
You were telling me before we went on air that you had an experience in a field or in a meadow, a vision.
Yeah.
Would you like to share that with us?
Yeah, 2 years after I'd been initiated by the yogi in 1977 in the kind of mind-blowing experience. And 2 years later, I'd graduated from MIT in the intern period, and I became a sort of a junior mechanical engineer at Hewlett-Packard in Palo Alto, California. And during this period of time, it was sort of a spiritual ascetic period of time. I wasn't doing much socially. My life consisted of working and working out, and I was doing a lot of prayer and fasting and meditation. So one day, during my lunch hour, I was running up in the hills above Stanford University. I would do a lot of long-distance running, 10 to 18 miles kind of runs. And I was running up the Stanford Telescope off 280, and I caught a bee between my fingers, and it stung me. And as a child, I'd had a real severe reaction to bee stings, a lot of pain, a lot of swelling. So I've been doing this visualization stuff, so I kind of rolled my eyeballs into my forehead and visualized bursting the toxins, and instantly the pain of the bee sting was gone. But the next thing that happened, and I'll just describe it as closely as I can, is it felt like a spinning vortex showed up above my head, and my spirit kind of went thump. It like spun up through the vortex, and all of a sudden I'm in the midst of a vision. And in the vision, I'm in a meadow, and in the vision, I look more like Moses. I mean, I don't look like Moses in this life. It's like the Moses in the Ten Commandments, Charlton Heston. I have long white hair and a big white robe on me, and I have Roman-style sandals with a thong that lashes up your calves.
Mm-hmm.
And I have two of my sort of spiritual disciples or students tagging along behind me. And in the vision, I'm in a beautiful green meadow, and I look ahead, and the Christ is in the meadow. And he turns towards me and stretches out his hand. And he's just totally unconditional, radiant love, like no judgment, no anger, just joy and love is all that's coming off of him. And he stretches out his hand and says, "I'm glad you've come. I've been waiting for you." Now, I'm sure that there's a lot more that went on, but I have no recollection of it, because when I came back through that spinning vortex into conscious awareness of my body had run up this small mountain, across the top, and back down the other side again, about a 3-mile distance with a very large, 600-foot elevation climb. And when I'm back in the awareness of my body, I'm just flying down the road. I'm supercharged. It's just like when I'd been initiated by the yogi. I felt like I was on fire. In the Bible, it says, they asked John the Baptist, they say, "Are you him? Are you the Christ?" And he says, "No, I baptize with water. The one comes after me who baptizes with fire." So here I am, flying down the road, baptized with fire. I feel like there's 1,000,000 volts traveling through me. There's tears streaming down my cheek. My eyes are kind of balled up into my forehead, and I fly back to Stanford at a sub-4-minute mile for the next mile. And normally, I was a good runner in high school, and I used to run 60-second quarters, so I know what the pace of a 4-minute mile is, but I couldn't normally keep it up for a whole mile. And on that day, I ran it at a sub-4-minute mile for the mile back to Stanford. And, it was another life-changing experience. And I've had several in my life, and probably the more recent one was actually when I received the storyboard outline for the book in my head. So probably the 3 big ones in my life was the yogi zapping me, and then the vision being yanked out of my body for Vision with Jesus, and then the last one 20 years later was the being gifted with the outline for my book in an instantaneous flash. Now, it was tough. Here I am, a Jewish kid from Burlington, Vermont, and I really kept quiet about this. It's been 30 years, and publicly I've only spoken now in a couple of small radio shows that are spiritually based. And, what do? You go back home and say, "Gee, Mom and Dad, I saw Jesus on my lunch hour today." It's like, no, they're going to lock you up in the nut house. And so it took me a long time to come to grips with it, and it was actually through hypnotherapy sessions with my wife, who around 1990 became trained as a hypnotherapist, that I finally sort of made sense out of all this and started to understand why me. As a young engineer, I thought, why me? As a Jewish kid from Burlington, Vermont, seeing Jesus on your lunch hour. Why me? Now I understand, but I didn't understand it until the 1990s when I used hypnotherapy to actually figure out why me. Then it became clear.
What other uses does hypnotherapy have in a person's life?
Well, hypnotherapy, for me, has been quite valuable for dealing with sort of those knee-jerk reactions that many of us have, where when you react irrationally, certain things push your buttons, and it seems like, talk therapy, whatever, just can't seem to heal that or get behind that. And in hypnotherapy, it's like you have a direct access to the soul, so you can go to the root of an issue. And regardless of your belief systems, people, when they go to the root of their issues, often end up seeing other lifetimes in other places. And you may be a fundamentalist Christian and believe that past lives are something that are evil and of the devil and totally non-existent, and yet go into hypnotherapy and dealing with a root issue, and all of a sudden you see yourself, drowning in a ship in crossing the ocean in the 1700s, or being tortured in some weird place in the third world, or some kind of traumatic root to your issue. For instance, let me give you an example.
Okay.
And this example is written down in the healing chapter of my book, When Technology Fails. And there was a client of my wife's who had crippling arthritis in her knees, and she was in her 40s, early 40s. She was roughly 40 years old, and she had to sit in her bed and massage her knees for 10 minutes in the morning before she could get out of bed and walk to the bathroom. I mean, that's really bad. And so my wife did some work with her on this issue, and it's like going back to the root of the issue, and this woman ended up seeing herself as a Native American warrior on a battlefield. And in this particular battle, it was Indian against Indian. It wasn't cowboys and Indian. It was Native American of one tribe against some other tribe. And in this battle, the warrior had been entrusted with her/his. It was a male warrior in that life, female person in this life. So his younger brother was entrusted under his care. He was supposed to make sure the younger brother survived the battle and was okay. So it goes into battle, and the younger brother is engaged in battle and with somebody, and he's engaged with somebody else, and he's in a life and death struggle of his own, and so he's not able to assist his younger brother, and his younger brother is killed. So when the battle is over, the older brother is alive and, quote, victorious, but he feels like such a failure because he failed to save the younger brother's life that had been entrusted to his care. So he takes his battle axe, and in his anguish over his failure of saving his younger brother's life, he kneecaps himself in both knees. So he takes the battle axe and slams it down onto both of his own knees and shatters his kneecaps. So for the rest of that life, every single step is like this painful reminder of his failure to save the younger brother's life. Now, in the Hindu tradition, they call this a samskara. It's like a scar, an etheric scar on your being, on your soul, from some traumatic experience. And so it was such a heavy mark on the soul that he wasn't able to dissolve it in the in-between lifetime period. So in this life, it manifested as crippling arthritis in the knees. So from seeing it in hypnotherapy from a soul experience level and letting go and releasing it, finally clearing it out of the energy field, then her knees were finally able to heal and come back to a significant degree. When no medicines and therapies or anything physical had managed to do that, the hypnotherapy was able to work where the regular physical treatments had failed. So that gives you some idea. I mean, it can be good for programming, for smoking, weight loss, all that, but the deeper hypnotherapy is more effective than simple programming, because not only do they have the programming tools, but they also have the ability to go to the root of the issue and to release it on a soul level so you can really be done with it.
What's the difference between hypnotherapy and neuro-linguistic programming?
Well, neuro-linguistic programming is very valuable, and it can be something that's very effective, and many hypnotherapists know neuro-linguistic programming. But neuro-linguistic programming is sort of saying that you get yourself into a state and you program keys in. You sort of associate a state of mind with an action, and you program keys in. And it's a way of very effectively changing behavior patterns, and a way of effectively, like, for instance, who's the guy that Tony Robbins said, Anthony Robbins is a master of neuro-linguistic programming, and he became a black belt after a single year of working in martial arts, and he's very effective at that. But neuro-linguistic programming, so for instance, there are therapists who are aware of neuro-linguistic programming that will say the reason talk therapy often fails is if you understand neuro-linguistic programming, you get people start talking about their anger and their relationship and this and that. And by neuro-linguistic programming, when you understand that, it's like, oh my God, the talk therapist is actually reinforcing the programming for all the negative, yucky feelings and patterns in the relationship. Instead of clearing them, typical talk therapy is actually using the principles of neuro-linguistic programming to program them in and strengthen the things you're actually trying to get rid of. So they're different. In hypnotherapy, you can use neuro-linguistic programming tools, which is kind of like the more programming aspects of hypnotherapy,
Right.
but you can also use it to bypass that thinking mind that I was talking about with the pit of the stomach. So you can actually access the greater wisdom of the soul, the inner being, and bypass that thinking mind to get to the root. So your mind may think, well, I'm this way because my mama did this and my daddy did that in my
Right.
childhood, and that's why I'm all messed up. But then when you go in hypnotherapy with a good hypnotherapist who can go really deep, then you basically turn that mind off and say, okay, where did it really come from? And sure, maybe your mama did this and your daddy did that, but like in my case, I had an extremely dark mother that had a lot of emotional problems.
Oh, sorry.
But from a soul perspective, I saw that I'd set myself up, that I was a very powerful, kind of arrogant being in other lifetimes and places, and I needed to learn more compassion for others.
Matthew,
So I set myself up for stuff.
Matthew, we have to take our final break. I want to thank you so much for coming on and for sharing these experiences with us. We'll have to have you back on because, we still have to talk about when technology fails.
I know it's an incredible book, and it was given to me for a reason. So, yes, we'll definitely have to be back on.
All right, Matthew, please stand by. You and I will be back on the other side of this break as the X Zone wraps up for this week here in the X Zone from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away, X Zone Nation. We'll be right back.
On my way to better things, I found myself some wings. Distant roads are calling me. No time for a summer friend. No time for the love you send. Seasons change and so did I. You need not wonder why. You need not wonder why. There's no time left for you. No time left for you.
Welcome back, everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking all our guests tonight. James Goy Jr. and I talked in hour number 1. Tanya Diamond, hour number 2. Dr. Joanne Bishop in hour number 3. And my guest this hour, Matt Stein. His website is www.whentechfails.com. That's www.whentechfails.com. First of all, Matt, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight here in the X Zone. And you see, I believe in synchronicity. I believe that the universe has its own destiny for us. And even though you and I started talking about when technology fails, somebody upstairs or wherever said, no, we'd want you guys to talk about his experiences so that he can share that there is more to this life than what you guys had planned. So you see, this is what I was telling you about off air, Matt, is that things happen here on their own. So thanks very much for sharing with us tonight here in the X Zone.
Well, you're welcome, and I don't get to share stories like this very often because I don't want to be called a lunatic, and and most shows just aren't interested. It's too often the fringe. So I really get a charge out of it, and anytime I do share the stories like with Jesus and
Yes.
the yogi, and then I feel very spiritually and emotionally and energetically charged up afterwards. It's a real blessing for me to be able to share this with people.
See, I believe, Matt, that we're all connected. That we're all connected through what some people may want to call the life force, the universal force, God. And when we share the experiences that relate to this connectedness, we win. We're doing what we're supposed to do. People who suppress it end up being very negative, very mean, very sad people. But when you share it, like you said, you get that tingly feeling all over.
I agree. And you know what? I've done some work. We don't have time to talk about it now, but in another time where we've actually been able to connect with, call them your spirit guides or any guides, and have conversations with them. And it turns out, according to them, that these synchronicities that are common into the human experience, that everyone has experienced, that's like the guides in the inner plane, my guides working with your guides, trying to tug at our ear and pull at our heartstrings and make things happen, or encourage us to allow things to happen. And when you allow it, that's when the synchronicity happens in your life. And it's common to everyone in the human experience, I believe.
Matt, thank you very much for joining us and for taking time out of your busy day to share your experiences here with us tonight in the X Zone. And we look forward to having you back on in the near future.
It's such a pleasure. I like to leave people with my motto, and even though we didn't talk about the book much, but my motto is I ask everyone to do your best to change the world and do your best to be ready for the changes in the world. And it's really been a pleasure being on your show tonight.
Thank you very much, sir. Matt Stein has been my guest this hour. WhenTechFails.com. Well, that's it for this week, everyone. I'll be back Monday night. Have a great weekend. Thank you for allowing us to be part of your day, your night, no matter where you are on this great big planet of ours. And always remember to keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. Good night, everyone. Have a great, safe weekend.